basics of Blender. We're here to talk 3D modeling. Woo! We love Blender. Give it up for Blender. Yeah. And thank you all for being here at 11:30 at night to talk 3D modeling. I'm very touched. I love Blender this much. I'm glad to see other people maybe do too. And if you don't already, maybe you will. All right, so this is alternatively titled How Not to Follow a Disco Cactus Concert, because OMG, come on, that's not fair. That was a hype concert, as it always is, so we're gonna lower the energy down. We all need to recover a little. We're gonna learn 3D modeling. It's exciting in its own way. Maybe not Disco Cactus Concert exciting. But all right, a couple of people to thank up front here. Just thank you to MAGFest for having me. We love MAGFest, I love MAGFest. I've been coming to MAGFest for many years. It's awesome to be up here on stage. This is only my third year as a staff and the first time I've been here staffing in person, which is very exciting to me. Thank you to our VRChat department team. We have Texelsor right up here. If anything here looks cool or works, that's to his credit. The rest of our team are over working the portal right now. Like I said, we'll go give them proper shouts out and when we're done. And also our virtual harbor folks. We have a Discord. Actually, I don't think it's on a slide in here, but it's our development team that does a lot of the work that is our VRChat stuff, sort of bleeding into other sort of projects as well. So we have a lot of awesome people there. Just thank you all for being here. But yeah. All right, so who am I? It's a question I ask myself every day. I am MAGLord. I go by GP Lord. It's just my name. I don't profess to be Lord of anything. People have been asking me that about the username. I just realized that's probably how that comes off. VRChat, that's my name there, Discord, etc. By day, I am a mild-mannered, what am I, assistant director of design. I work for Northeastern University. But by night, and most of the night, all night, not getting enough sleep at night, working for projects such as these. I'm a staff member for MAGFest, co-department head for the MAGLord, the aforementioned 3D version of our sort of wacky project that lives in VRChat. I'm also a member of the theme team, and I'll talk about some of the ways that I use Blender for that. Our other big project, VGM Together. Shouts out to Nudge here, co-director. I'm design lead and co-VR lead for that. Blender absolutely threaded through both of these projects to the core, so they are the examples from which I will try to draw. And I'm gonna like start a stopwatch here because I'm just terrible at time. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm not the strongest with time management. My phone's asking me if I want to upgrade. No, we're going to do that later. Okay, that's great. Stopwatch. There we go. Pose Nightclub, did I hear? Yes, Pose Nightclub. All right, the Virtual Harbor Project, if you've heard of Pose Nightclub, not the one upstairs, but based on the one upstairs. Pose, P-O-E''S. Poe is our cat, and she's a delight, and we made a nightclub after her, so yeah. Multiple Pose nightclubs here. They're both great, I'm sure. I actually don't know the real one. Okay, that's definitely what I look like in real life. And if you know me in VRChat, that's what I look like there. So for the people here who know me through VRChat, if that helps you recognize. I seriously was going to include a picture of what I look like in real life, but being virtual for 3 years has really done things to my sense of physical presence. All right, so the big question, what is Blender? All right, so I'm very excited that you have all decided to begin your your journey into smoothies, shakes, so much more. We're gonna talk techniques, we're gonna talk models. I'm actually obligated to make this joke. I'm very sorry. I'm not that sorry. Okay, for real, what is Blender? Blender is 3D modeling software, sort of put most simply, but it is sort of famous for being kind of every different type of 3D software all in one. Very, very, very importantly, it is free, it is open source. That's not true of most 3D applications. Also importantly, it runs on like anything. I literally have Blender installed on my Steam Deck and like use it there productively. It's great for animation, for rendering, for sculpting, all of the sort of like taxing things that you can do in 3D that are sometimes specialty software all of their own. And here's the logo. I guess we've seen that. We're going to do that slide again because I think I accidentally duplicated it. Just to reiterate. Okay, Blender and MAGFest. So how does this all fit to where we are here? This is the VR MAGLord, our sort of 3D model view of the atrium in particular. It's not one-to-one to the real Gaylord here that we all know and love, but it is sort of a themed version of it that's meant to be. What's that? Yeah, it's weirdly close in some ways and completely different in others. I meant to say at the beginning, I really want this to sort of be a thing that's like useful to people. If you have questions, like just interrupt me. I'd really love to like talk, but I'm gonna just talk forever unless people sort of interrupt me. So that said, this is our little commercial here. I'm running on Mag TV this weekend. A view of this thing in action. The DeVito Shrine, what used to be the little market downstairs. This is the Rocking Bay, which is our sort of sci-fi themed concert hall. This is the gallery that sort of shows all of the history of MAGFest, all the models, and very importantly, the portal. This is last year footage we took. This year's going on right now. So there it is. We've replaced the lower atrium with an 80-foot wide fountain of King Donut because that's what you should do. And it just wants to play again. I don't know how to use PowerPoint. Hi. Did it really disconnect? Thank you all for coming. I swear. It's truly perfect. Thank you. Help. All right, for real, like if you're in PowerPoint and you're playing a video, how do you be like go to the next thing, but like... Yeah, I'm trying it. Control. Alt F4 to cheat. Well, we were off to a good start. If anybody has a song that they'd like to begin, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. We're gonna like brute force this here.
Are you gonna reboot the computer?
Nah, but we're gonna re-plug the plug. Hello, if you are better at computer than me. I see Windows. Well, we're doing good. Hey, there we go. All right. All right, so we're back. Let that be a lesson. What can go wrong?
Easier or harder than using Blender?
I'm gonna say much easier, but we're gonna get to that too. All right, now I get this cool little like next slide, previous slide view now. We've upgraded. All right, so yeah, that's the portal, our little logo for our project there. We are in the Maryland hallway. It's, if you go out here and go, if you hit the Jumbotron, turn right, we're all the way down there. It will be going all weekend. All right, so how I or we, our team, use Blender. The VR MAGLord project we've talked about, it's basically, yeah, MAGFest themed riff on the Gaylord. I will make the environment, the props, memes, character artwork, etc., all of that good stuff. One of my favorite things about MAGFest is, and especially this year because the theme this year is really collecting from all of the previous years, which is awesome, we have just this whole backlog of really great like characters, art assets, theme things, and you can really take this and do like awesome things with it in Blender. So what I've done is, for this year, we did these sort of character reveals. On the left there is Sunny McShreds, the sort of Star Fox inspired character. You see the turnaround down there. It's very small on the screen here, but it's a nice big character turnaround. You see the character from multiple angles. That's enough to put it in Blender and start modeling things, and you get things like this little Smash style character reveal for Sunny. That's a model I worked on earlier in the year. Good old King Donut coming up next. Just kind of rolling down the way here, because how else do you get around if you're a big donut? The point of this being all of this is Blender, of course. And then you've probably seen this one on a lot of stuff. This is Final Festination, our sort of background asset to a lot of the sort of Smash theme stuff this year. It's awesome because that, you know, it's a GameCube game originally, and you got this kind of low poly aesthetic, like low polygon count. Easy to model, but stays right on theme. It's great. All right, so you're obviously convinced by now. You're like, I need Blender right now. Where do I get it? Blender.org, download. One question I get a lot is like, there are a lot of versions of Blender. It updates all the time. Like, do you want to just go for it? Yeah, get the latest one. It's great. If you need a long-term support version, if you're running this in a lab or something, I used to have a computer lab that would have many versions of this. You could do that. And then there are also these really cool like alpha and beta versions that have all these experimental videos. Yeah.
The Steam version auto updates.
I think it does, and I think that's fine. I would say the only reason not to have the current version of Blender is if you have like a weird add-on or something that you know only works in a particular version, which is why I have like 4 versions of Blender installed at a time. But the average person, don't worry about it. All right, but why Blender? It's a good question. All right, here's the big one, is that Blender is free. And you know, it's almost a cynically practical kind of answer, but it's a very big deal. And it's not just free, it's open source, which means people contribute to it. There's a whole community of developers, and they get to be very clever about what they do because it's completely open. Other 3D development software is less free. For fun, I went around and like sort of priced the current thing for the commercial licenses. Maya is maybe the most popular alternative in a lot of ways. It's very expensive. Yeah, I'm just going to make that big there. There are student licenses. There are a lot of things that make this not entirely true, but the point is, you know, these are expensive commercial softwares.
So how exactly do we pirate these?
I am not able to answer that question. I encourage you to talk to your community peers, but yeah. 3ds Max is the same thing. Cinema 4D, all of these. The point is, all of these things cost money, and they're all great. All of these have their uses, and in many ways, a lot of these specialize in ways that are really good and can compare favorably to what Blender does, sort of by jack-of-all-trades logic. But they're all expensive. Even SketchUp, which used to be like Google's free 3D thing, is costly these days. It's no longer a Google tool. All right, but you know, free is one thing. Blender, on its own merits, it really it does everything in a broad sort of way. So the idea that something like ZBrush is there for sculpting specifically, Blender does sculpture, and it does it really well. ZBrush might have more specialized tools, but Blender is there to do that. It's traditional 3D modeling, certainly. UV mapping is how you do textures. You can draw like 2D artwork on it. You can rig up animated models, animate those models. It does physics simulations. It does sculpture, like I said, rendering, all of those things. You can do animations with your renders, motion graphics, video editing, composite. I don't know why I made this list this long. There's a lot of things. It's cross-platform, so if you have Windows, if you have a Mac, if you have Linux, you are good. If you have a Steam Deck, which, you know, it runs really well on like anything. I've been using Blender for literally 20 years, and like I shudder to think what the specs of the first computers I was using Blender on were, but it would probably still run fine on those. Obviously, more taxing things. That's Blender running on the potato version of GLaDOS, and that's obviously a real image because of the Blender logo poorly photoshopped onto it.
Did you make that in Blender?
I could have. What I'll say is I should have made that in Blender, yes. I really do, like, people will ask me, like, what things do you use Blender for? And my answer is yes. All of the things. Okay, so there's a really, really good community around Blender. There's a ton of websites for learning things. I mean, YouTube alone, it just has a bunch of really great channels. I'll list some at the end. And then there are great, you know, forums that have been running forever. Every question you can think to ask is answered on some forum as long ago as forever. Really good subreddits and things like that for getting on and just sort of asking questions or showing off work. It's really one of the better online communities I've ever seen is Blender and 3D modeling in general. One of the things that I sort of focus on here for the MAGFest crowd is the idea that this is a pipeline into game development. You know, there are tools that are really specialized for going into game development engines, but I have only ever used Blender for everything, and you know, maybe there are things I could have done faster in other tools, but so far, nothing has been like, nope, can't do that because Blender. Unity and Unreal are sort of the two major game engines that a lot of people use, so I will say Blender goes just fine into either of them, give or take a couple of like Google questions about how to do certain things. We can also get things into 3D print formats from this, so a lot of people that are making sculptures or models for 3D print, you can export to formats that'll print great. There are things like add-ons for things things like papercraft. There are add-ons that make up some of the difference between like Blender and something like Fusion 360 that would be really specialized for like machine parts, or like things that need really, really exact thresholds. And yeah, lots of generic models to output to other tools. The drawbacks, there are some, I will admit. The learning curve people will talk about is steep. That's Link navigating Blender's learning curve. It goes backwards a little bit, not just up. I will say this, Blender has, I think, an old reputation more than a deserved reputation for being really hard to learn. I would say over the last few years in particular, it's really come a long way in sort of becoming more conventional. But one of the things I'll say is that its interface is really, really particular to Blender. Like it's almost not at all concerned with what other 3D applications or any other program is doing. It just does things its own way.
So Nintendo.
Nintendo was the comment. Yeah, it's the Nintendo of 3D modeling applications. Like I said, some tools have direct pipelines. Like you can get Maya things synced back and forth to ZBrush or to game engines. Blender is maybe a little bit more hands-on, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. Basically what I'm saying is it's sort of that jack of all trades, maybe not as specific to some of the others. What you will need to use Blender, I will say the only need I will say is you really probably do need a mouse to use Blender. I really hate trying to use it on a trackpad. A computer of at least potato quality. I will say this is true of any 3D software, of course, but if you're doing some of the really hard drive intensive things, just be prepared to eat a lot of your hard drive with what are going to be output animations or images or sculptures that yeah. Well, you probably want a big monitor. The interface goes on forever if you want it to. Numpad is particularly important for Blender. It's really like numpad heavy, so I would say like a 10 keyless keyboard feels frustrating. I'm on a laptop and it ends up meaning that I use like one of these mice that has all of the sort of side keys just because that's my numpad, which is a good solution. Reasonable graphics card and processor. I mean, yes, it will run on anything, but certain tasks are really hard to do, so you want something that actually like performs. Cloud storage is great if you work across multiple machines. Blender is good with sort of moving between machines, but it's great if you're always synced to like OneDrive or Google Drive or something. And lastly, I love Blender, but one thing I would say, you probably don't want to do your like graphics editing directly in Blender. You can, but if you're doing like textures and things, there are tools that are going to be a little bit better for the job. So all of that setup aside, let's just get into Blender. Yeah.
So on the why Blender? So if I'll use myself as an example. So I've learned Data Studio for rendering and GIMP for graphics. Yep. If I'm trying to get into 3D modeling, assuming price isn't the overwhelming factor, why Blender versus another specialized tool if we've already kind of gotten one of the skill sets that's covered by Blender? What's the advantage there?
I would say, it's probably most helpful to just not think of it as an exclusive tool in a pipeline. I would say if there are things that Blender does well that you like it to do, like if you're familiar with Blender sculpting and you want to use a different model or a different software for your polygon modeling or something, it's totally fine. They're going to go to the same sort of formats in the end. A game engine's waiting for like, an FBX or something, and it doesn't really matter where it came from. So within a team project, it might be that somebody else wants to use something else, and the end product kind of doesn't matter. It's the same way that somebody might use Maya, but when they're going to sculpt, they would switch to ZBrush and then go back and forth. It's kind of that thing, like Blender fits anywhere in a pipeline, and I'd say put it where you want it, and it doesn't, that's not the only thing you need to use. It is the only thing I use. That's almost like become a weird self-challenge more than anything. I have used ZBrush, I've used Maya. It's become just a thing where like for whatever reason I don't. Sorry,
one follow-up question.
Yeah.
In terms of learning the technical skill, so if you've never sculpted before, you haven't rendered before, how is Blender compared to those other tools in terms of learning the technical side of the skill as opposed to the interface?
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where I would say my philosophy on any software is you can probably learn the software in like a weekend if you really sit down and go through the right YouTube tutorials or whatever. past that, it's the sort of artistry of a thing, and that's that learning curve. That's that like 1,000-hour learning curve where it's like you're just going to get better at the actual, seeing a thing and knowing how to take it from what you're seeing to what you want it to be. I would say, try both if you have access to ZBrush, and ZBrush is on a subscription model now, so maybe it's not quite as big of a commitment, but I would say certainly Blender can do those things. So if anybody is looking at a project like game development and they just can't get into those other tools, I would very comfortably say Blender could be all you ever need. And it might be the kind of thing that, like, if you're on a budget, you use today, and someday, you save up and get your team ZBrush licenses and feel like, now I can do even more. But I don't think it's ever a roadblock, it's just an alternative. But yeah, all right, so we're gonna get into Blender now. One thing I'll say right now, this is an hour-long panel. There's no way I can get into the, like, okay, now you're all 3D modeler stuff, but I do want to just sort of show everything in a, like, the meme of, like, draw the rest of the owl, and it's like just a little circle. I have too much stuff, and I'm not going to finish on time, I already know. But I want to sort of get as many of these things on screen to just kind of take the magic out of them. Like, none of these things are just how did they do that magic. Like, they're all approachable skills. And the answer to everything I'm going to show is there's probably a really good YouTube video or 60 about how to do that. That's how I've learned everything I've ever done. So now we're going to anger the HDMI gods again and try and switch sources. Oh boy. I had this dream of going back and forth to the slide deck. That dream is dying in a shade of blue here. What have I done? I don't know if I have a helper here. I'm gonna do the unplug, replug again. Blender would never do this.
Have you tried doing multi-desktop switching?
Multi-desk.
That works for you. That was not interrupting your presentation.
Yeah, how does that work? Can I tell you how unsurprised I am that Texelsaur is about to come help me with a technical problem? Give it up for our favorite Scyther and Flick this weekend. This is absolutely how our working dynamic goes, by the way. Yes?
How do you see anything on here?
If you think I want it to be this resolution, it has decided it hates me, and it's planted its flag. Good Lord. It has gone to full 4K, which is, yeah.
All right.
Somewhere down there is an icon that says Blender.
All right. So start your presentation on this screen. If you want to do something else, Control Windows arrow key to switch.
Control Windows arrow key.
And then back arrow to switch.
Hey, look at that. All right, so people accuse Blender of having really convoluted keyboard shortcuts. I'm remembering Control Windows arrow key to see my monitor.
The present icon is exactly like 6 pixels wide.
But what a 6 pixels they are. Okay.
Let's make sure that's
Texelsaur for the win. Again, our favorite Scyther. Okay. Remember, if you've got a problem in your life, Control Windows arrow key. It's our new mantra. We're gonna all sing that in our dreams. I don't know where I was going with that. All right. Now the trick is I have to get a window onto that. Does that like drag over? It does. All right. Nope. It doesn't. It is. What? To the top. What's that keyboard shortcut? Why, it's Control Windows arrow key. All right, to the one poor soul that is watching this in the future on YouTube, yeah, it's midnight and it's been a long day. Thank you for watching this, and I'm so sorry. All right, so I would like to introduce you to a celebrity in Blender world. This is Default Cube, one of 2 mascots of Blender. We love Default Cube. We're gonna do some just classic 3D modeling here, but we need to remember to respect the default cube. So here's what happens. You launch Blender, you get default cube. You don't need default cube, so you delete default cube, and then you start whatever you're gonna work on, and you think, okay, I'm gonna start with a cube. So you add a cube back. The other reason we respect default cube is we don't know what happens to that poor cube when you delete it. There are theories. And if you are familiar with the companion cube from Portal, it is compared. It should sing, yes. And then if you really love Blender, you pay tribute to it in clothing. I have the other shirt. But yes, and we may or may not own Blender socks within our VRChat team. Okay, so we're gonna just talk about some of the very, very basics here. And we're gonna do Control Windows arrow key. That's also for that YouTube person in the future. What's funny is I can't see this here. I have no idea how this is gonna go. I have to like look at that.
Oh, jeez.
Is there a way to do that? Can I just turn off mirroring?
Try the settings menu. If you're using, go to the set up multiple displays and set it to duplicate display instead of
Windows P is the arcane shortcut for that.
Windows P, is that real?
Yes.
I call it set.
Am I real? It's midnight.
I can't even see it.
Duplicate these displays. Oh, it is happening now. Keep changes, yes. Do you see that? That is the display settings of success. Oh, we're back. All right, ready? Advanced mode. Oh wait, can I just control Windows arrow key? You know I can. All right, here we go. All right, so basics, very basics. If I had too little time, now I have way too little time. All right, but we have our default cube. Two main things for Blender. I'm not gonna go through like the how-to Blender for all this stuff. I'm gonna try and show things more than like teach things, because YouTube is the way to learn these things if you're on your own. Install Blender, sit down, play with it, and like turn off whatever frustration you can turn off. Make a nice cup of tea, take some time, lower the lights, whatever. But it's great, I promise. Okay, so that sounded really ominous, like you're gonna hate Blender. All right, so default cube here. What we can do, we have two modes that are 90% of your time in Blender. Object mode here is what we're in by default. Think of object mode as like the set with props on it, or the table with toys on it or something. These are finished models that you can move around, compose scenes, animate, all of those things. If you want to change what the model is, tab is the one key. If you remember no other key, you're into edit mode now. And if you can see here, I know it's small, we now see like the vertices here of default cube, which means we can actually start editing default cube. So if we wanted to get in and change this, we've now modeled like a small ramp. So
Default trapezoid.
Default trapezoid. All right, all of this, there are basically three main operations. This is true of any 3D modeling, but we can grab is our G key. We can translate things. You can constrain it to axes if you want to just move along certain things. We can rotate. So we're going to rotate our default cube and hopefully not make it dizzy. And then we can scale. That's true in object mode with our finished cube, or if we wanted default trapezoid to do those things, we could scale these. We could rotate. This is going to get real wonky. And then we can, translate. So those are the main, like, just common things you're gonna do all the time. Now if we're modeling something, we probably want more than 8 vertices in a cube. So we start getting into like, what are the tools for just actually adding geometry, starting to make a model. I would say there are a few that are sort of core you'll use all the time. Those are basically, we have extrusion, which is to just sort of take a side and pull it out, and now we can start making things. If we do this and pull out a couple sides and pull out a top one and pull out a bottom one, we've made a very simple sword. I don't know. It's a Minecraft sword. It's the kind of sword you'd make out of cardboard when you're 6. But we've modeled it in Blender now. There are things like well, here's what we'll do. It's MAGFest. We're gonna find a way to use these practically. So I'm gonna go into a wireframe view. Blender has a few views. The couple that'll matter right now are just wireframe and shaded, what they call solid. So what you can do is let's model the mainstay of, what did I just do? Okay. All right, so we're going to grab our side here. We're going to look at it from the front view. We have camera controls up here. This is one of the reasons I say have a numpad. All the camera stuff lives on the numpad. Very convenient to have. We're going to extrude this out. We're going to extrude it one more time. We're going to extrude this out. We're going to do that again. I'm hitting Control there to snap. We're going to do a couple more of these, and guess what we have modeled after a second? That absolutely ubiquitous MAGFest theme object, which is the square wave, part of the MAGFest logo. I'm going to cheat here and show something I was going to show later, but we have modifiers in Blender that like to duplicate our geometry and start to stack it near each other. So a couple of those and we've got our MAGFest square wave. So there's extrusion. We have things like, let's do loop cuts here. So we're going to get our default cube back. Remember, we deleted it cruelly, and now we're just making it again. If you want to divide up geometry that's already there, we can add a loop cut. It's sort of like, think of like a flow of faces, like where one face hands off into the next. Those are called loops in 3D modeling. We can cut that in half. And let's say we cut that in half, and now we've made a little house. And we can go back to our friend extrusion here, and let's grab the faces here, and we can extrude out a little roof. And actually, we can do that another way. We'll do that out a little bit there, so that now we can take these sides and make a little overhang roof. Ooh, look at our little house, it's beautiful. And here, let's pull that roof forward a little bit too. All right, and now we've made like a little birdhouse or something, I don't know. But we can take these faces, and the last one I was going to show was inset, which is basically to take a thing and sort of like pull from all sides and sort of make like a smaller version of it, inset into itself. So now we could make that small and really make it a birdhouse and get rid of that little middle line. And there you go, you've made...
Same key as extrude?
What's that?
The same key as extrude?
Inset? No. All the keyboard shortcuts, I would say, are probably the thing to sit down and try and memorize at the beginning of learning Blender. It's very shortcut heavy. What they say about Blender is that it's really meant, it's idiosyncratic with all of its like shortcuts and things to be fast. And I'm a big believer in that. I do think people that first start using it are like, yeah, that's nonsense, this is just really frustrating. And then after like a couple weeks, you're like, no, actually this is kind of cool and it is really fast. So, but yeah, those are different keys, they all have a key. They're sometimes mnemonically sound like E for extrude, I for inset, and then G for translate. Yeah. They call it grab to get away with that. What's that? I'm sorry? Okay. Last thing I'll show here, just some of the basics, is bevel, which is a fun one. So we can bevel edges, which is to say sort of cut them a little bit. We make like a little chamfer here or something. And as we move our mouse wheel, it can add more and more of the like little things. We make a nice little curve there. Or we can just take the whole thing and we can bevel that. And now we start to make like little nice rounded corners. These almost look like sections of like a sphere. And you've modeled like a classic old, like, you know, die from a board game or something. There you have it, your first model. But yeah, one of the cool things about all of this is right now we've been doing everything just in its default mode where everything scales away from its center. Blender has a sort of design paradigm of like this 3D cursor. So if you see this little like red and white little circle thing there, that's the 3D cursor, which you can put wherever you want. So we'll put our cursor on the selected vertex there, and we can tell it we want to do things based on that. So now if we want to scale it relative to that point, we can do things like that. So that's one of the ways Blender wants to work. Blender, I would say the task for modeling anything is to just start from whatever shape is sort of closest. Blender gives you a menu of primitives, so these are they. There is a plane, just sort of a flat plane with 4 vertices, a cube, default cube by another name, circle, UV spheres. So, you know, if you wanted to, if you are fresh from your Disco Cactus concert and you're like, I really want to model a disco ball, I'm hyped up, there you have it. You've added your UV sphere in there. That's your tribute to Disco Cactus. Or you can even get fancy and do like little inset faces. And you can, I'm just winging this here, extrude those out and, you know, make our little, there you go, now it's a proper disco ball. This probably is not how you'd model a disco ball, but yeah, we still, you know, it counts. And then last thing I was going to say, you know, some of the others, if you wanted to make a cylinder, maybe you'd take that and make it skinny and pull that up here. And what are we doing? We're going to pull that down here and then duplicate that and extrude that down. And then we're going to take all of this and scale that out and duplicate that and scale that out. And what are we making? Anybody guess? I'll give you a hint. It's on point for where we are. Oh, I heard it. It's the it's the Atari style controller to be our MAGFest logo. And boy, I'm struggling on keys tonight on this laptop. But yeah, so. Yeah, that's cool.
So, you showed earlier the model of the Gaylords. I know that's a huge project.
Yep.
Could show us that. You talk a bit about how you, when you're going into a big project like that, how you
I'll tell you what, given that I'm going to run out of time, let me find that in my deck here and show you a little video about that. I'm going to, here we go. So this is, I found this and I was really excited to find this. This is a screen capture of literally the very first day of working on this project, if it wants to play. Maybe. Oh, it hates playing that video. Yeah. How do I leave presenter mode?
There's the 3 little dots circle up underneath yours.
Okay. End show. I can maybe play it in just preview mode. You know, I don't mind that. Here we go. So if it plays, I'm happy. We can't see, can we? There we go. Nope. Boy, I just don't like PowerPoint. Hi, I'm really good at presenting. Yeah, it wants to like kick me out of that. I don't know why. Blender would never do that. I'm gonna keep making that joke every time this happens.
I do this in class all the time. If you go into it, you can escape out of the, are you still in presenter mode at that point?
No, it kicked back to extend the display where I wanted to duplicate the display. There we go. Boy, I'm on fire here tonight. There we go. It's as soon as I try to play a video, it just doesn't want to.
Put it in full screen for playing video.
Oh, man. Please. You know what? If this plays, I don't mind. All right, there we go. So yeah, the answer is one of the things you can do in Blender and probably every 3D modeling thing is put down a sort of background image. So the whole project started at the beginning of the pandemic, literally the day that it was announced that MAGFest 2020 was canceled. I went into this like weird grief spiral and I was like, but I'm not gonna get MAGFest this year. And I was like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm playing with 3D models all the time. I'm gonna find reference images online. I'm gonna put them down and I'm going to just model out as much of this building as I can. And it turned into this idea. At the time, what I thought I was going to do was try to make like a little like video game out of the Gaylord, and like you'd run around as King Donut or something. Luckily, this project found me, and it turned into VRChat, and now we're all actually using it. But the idea of you know, this, like any other project, just happened one model at a time. So like there's the gazebo being modeled. The gazebo doesn't look like that anymore in our model. We've sort of changed away from real model into sort of like themed version. But the gazebo's one model. The trees are one model. The building itself is a few models. One by one, they all stack together and they sort of become the thing that it is. This was fascinating to me to look back on because we've been doing this for 3 years now, and it's, you know, something that we've all gotten a lot better at. But to look back on this and sort of see it.
How long did that take though?
Question, yeah.
With the blueprint there, did you like scale that out yourself, or did you like find references of the blueprint?
Yeah, the question is whether like how we found those reference images. Is that right? I would say that was actually a big challenge. I don't mean for this to be like a VR MAGLord panel, but because this is about the modeling thing, yeah, it was tricky because, you know, there are not necessarily to scale maps online. They're sort of meant to guide people through a hotel. They're not blueprints. So the idea of sort of finding those, putting those in, they're good enough. And, you know, if they're a good map, they're probably recognizable if you sort of make a model out of it too. But over time, it's gotten closer and closer to accurate because we sort of realize what the distance is between those maps and what the real space is. But that's the best answer I can give quickly, is like basically trying to look at like modeling something as simple as like, okay, here's the first or the second floor of the atrium, and now I can put all the little things where they go, gathering up photo references and all of that. It just sort of grew over time, but none of those are complicated models. It's just that, you know, when you've been working on it over a couple of years, they've added up to the point that it looks like a big complicated model altogether. Yeah, question?
Is there a way to like if someone is modeling one floor of the Gaylord and the other person is modeling a separate floor and has a separate file, and combine those files together like one big.
That's actually been tricky. Blender has inside of it what are called collections, and I'm gonna like juggle monitors here for 5 minutes trying to show you those, but let's do it. Blender can sort of, I hate this projector. No, oh yeah. Oh, we're back in the thing. So I could take this model here and, all right, I can't even move. Anybody feel like
I guess it's the same.
Buying a computer?
Yourself a new file, and then someone else has a model of like the rest of the controller, and how do you put that together?
I would say the answer is, it's going to be like sort of source control like anything. It's best to sort of work on one part of a thing at a time and combine things. Texelsor here in the front row and I will often be modeling a big project together, and what we'll kind of do is work on it in stages, handing back and forth. And at that point you can sort of quarantine your section of it into a collection and sort of only work on that one part of it, and then somebody else might work on another. And you can actually pick up an entire collection and put it into a different blend file. So I could work on, the atrium side of the MAGLord, and he can work on the convention side, and we can basically just combine those two things. That part, I would say, has made that pretty decent. I need to figure this out once and for all. Every time I try to play this, it like goes into duplicate displays.
You can duplicate displays.
I almost want to just like turn my screen around and be like, look at the screen. That would not work. Yeah, it's we're just not gonna play videos anymore. Anyway, yeah. I'm gonna just sort of get into showing some stuff here. So let's look at so one of the things I was going to say, like approaching a model, a complicated model, you can think about the sort of workflows for things. So one of the things I was going to show is some of these modifiers. If you were to model a fence, like a picket fence, your classic sort of thing, you could model your one picket default cube again. It's a hero, remember. And it's going to be sort of a skinny board, and we're going to pull that up. And we're gonna put a loop cut in it so that we can take this top thing and pull that up. Now we've got our one little picket. And what we could do is take this and duplicate it over and duplicate it over and do that a couple hundred times and realize that we got some of the spacing wrong, or that, these really should be thicker. So then we could take one of these and, scale it out to be thicker. But we don't want to do that 100 times if we have 100 of these. So the right way to do it, and this is just sort of an example of like ways to approach modeling in general, is to use things like modifiers. Modifiers are part of what is basically called non-destructive modeling. It's a big part of working in Blender. You can do things that basically will change the model, but in a way that you can still edit later. You can still tweak, you can undo completely. So the array modifier here is one. You can set a sort of increasing duplicate here. I've got relative offsets. I could kill that and do constant offsets and know exactly 1 meter apart, or whatever. You can switch this to imperial if you're modeling based on exact dimensions that you have on a blueprint, etc. But all of those things, if you were modeling stairs, you could just as easily make a single step and then do your array, and this time give it more than one offset. So we're going to do 1 and let's do 5. And then duplicate that, and guess what? We've got the beginning of our stairs. And if you know the distances between the two things, you know the constant offsets. You can do that, model one stair, and then you've got all 20 of your stairs or whatever. They can get fancier and not cost you anything. Another one would be the mirror modifier, which is great if you're working on symmetrical things, which I'd say is the majority of the time working on something at least to a point. So if we wanted to model a table, we could come in here and model our tabletop, model a cube, and we'll go into our top view, put that down there, and then we'll pull this up. And we've modeled one of our table legs, and that's great, but if we wanted to duplicate that all around, we'd have to duplicate it. If we decided we wanted to make a leg skinnier or fancy or something, we'd have to do that. But we're modeling something symmetrical, so we can cut that in half, and cut that in half again, and we can actually just delete everything that's not in the part that we want to duplicate. So now we can go into our mirror modifier, and look, it makes the other half for us. Or we can do it on the y-axis, and it's made the other half for us. So if we come in here and we're like, all right, well, now we want this table leg to actually be a little bit skinnier, it's going to do it to all of them. If we want to make it a fancier table leg and take these and sort of make them, you know, let's cut that again. Now we can make a table leg with some character. I don't know. That's not a great example, but yeah. Last thing, and this is an important one, our last primitive that we get is called monkey. This is another Blender mascot. This is Suzanne. I'm sorry, I saw a question.
So if you want to break one of the table legs afterwards, can you separate them from here? And then
yeah. Tell you what, let me undo back to that. If you wanted to, oh boy, I ruined that leg. Well, that was supposed to be a, hold on a second. What did I, oh, it's Z fighting. Oh, I must have duplicated it. Yeah, all right. Struggling on this laptop, sorry. Muscle memory is a big part of this, I will say. It's weird how like attached to a particular keyboard you get. But yeah, so let's say we had done that properly to our table leg. Yeah, if I wanted to separate that out, I can just sort of grab everything attached to that, and then I can hit P, it's the separate menu, separate that selection off. Now I've got just the table legs. Those will still follow the same rules, they'll still have the same modifiers, but I can break that modifier on that, and it doesn't break it up here. I've still got that modifier here, so you know, if I wanted to make like a fancy edge up here or whatever, that's still going to be you know, happening all across the rest of the model, but this is still editable. That's a big part of modeling, is just sort of like making everything as individual pieces, because maybe if you're modeling King Donut and you want to make a sprinkle, you might make a sphere and sort of stretch it out, and now you've got one sprinkle, you make a dozen of them all over King Donut, and now you attach it to the model when you're done. They were separate objects, but now they're one. Yeah, very, very good question. We're going to talk about Suzanne here for a second. Suzanne is our monkey mascot. Suzanne is very low polygon, and that's an aesthetic all its own. I am old and love retro games, so it's a big thing. But part of the reason for this is that if you put on a modifier called subdivision surface, what it's going to do is split everything in half as many times as you tell it to, and not just split it in half, but like average the values of those splits so that it's sort of making it smooth. So we're going to watch that happen here. We're going to add that modifier, and Suzanne gets smoother, and then we increase the number of levels on that. And this is a big part of the sort of like, you know, like the Pixar model aesthetic where everything's sort of round and cartoony is basically taking things and subdividing them. So it's on purpose that this is like a sparse model, because that curvature stays across all of those average values as they get split. If you were to actually apply that modifier, and now Suzanne's real geometry is all of these thousands of polygons, it actually gets harder to go in and sort of make changes that don't break things. It's much easier to sort of change, you know, an eyebrow here and get like an interesting curve out of those sparser models. So very often really cool models can be achieved with low polygon, because you just know that you're going to do an effect like this on it non-destructively. If you don't want it when you're done, you know, you can come in here and kill it again. But yeah, that's part of that sort of paradigm.
Can you unsubdivide something?
Yes, and actually, yeah, let's do that. The question was, can you unsubdivide something? So we're going to apply this modifier, which means now those changes, all those subdivisions, all that averaging is part of the model. If we were to select this, there is actually an unsubdivide option in here. Unsubdivide is here, and it will start to go through and find those places where it can cut something in half again, or uncut something in half basically, and do that. So you could unsubdivide this basically back to what you had. That's true because of the topology. This is, you know, topology is too big of a topic to get into here, but topology is basically you want to make things the right shape, the right contours, so that they sort of, the shape of it flows with the thing that you're modeling. So this model has great topology, which means it subdivides well. Couple more here real quick. We're gonna look at one here that I've set up. This one is simple deform. This one's fun. So we made our square wave. We've got a square wave already. We learned the array modifier can extend that out. We can do that as many times as we want. But if we add on this simple deform modifier, this one just does fun stuff. You can just play with this and get like little swooshies. We already love that.
A couple months ago, I was seeing some stuff where people were like doing a challenge and trying to make a donut.
Yeah.
I wonder, is that like actually a good thing to try to learn with first?
Yeah, actually, it's funny about MAGFest having King Donut and it being such a thing because, like, the classic Blender tutorial, there's a YouTube channel called Blender Guru that is like the ubiquitous, like, everybody starts with Blender Guru kind of thing. There's a bunch of great YouTube series. That's not even one of the ones that I myself follow all that much. It's fine, it's great, but his intro series is Model a Donut, which means that, like, there's a subreddit for Blender and, like, it is awash with donuts to the point that, like, people, like, make fun of, like, okay, here's another donut. And, like, it's a great exercise. It's only funny because everybody does it. But yeah, it's funny in MAGFest world that donuts are everywhere. I would say something like that's a great example. Yeah, question? So
earlier you said that there are great videos to learn Blender on. What, in your opinion, are the right or good videos to learn?
I think Blender Guru probably is a really good one for just getting started. It's one of those things where I've been using Blender for 20 years and, you know, that's relatively new. So, like, I don't watch those not because there's anything wrong with them. It's just one of those things that, like, I feel like I'm watching really weird, like, answering questions kinds of videos. I actually really have meant to go through those just to sort of recommend them. I'll work with students teaching Blender, and I will send that to them, even sort of just knowing that other people like them. There's a really good channel that I'll shout out called Blender Secrets, and the reason I love that one is that it is directly to the point. Those videos are like 1 minute long. They're one thing demonstrated really quickly, really efficiently, and it's like you could watch it as many times as you want if it went quickly, and they do. But they're great for just being single sort of purpose things. Yeah, stuff like that, I would say. But, you know, oftentimes it really is a matter of how do I do this one really particular thing that I'm trying to solve. There's a video for it somewhere. Yeah.
Are you familiar with Worldtide LLC YouTube channel?
It sounds familiar, but I can't think of which one that is in particular.
Specializes in 3D modeling and animating.
Yeah, nice, yeah. You know, one of the things, there's all different kinds of 3D modeling, and I will say that there is, you know, there are people that specialize, and you should sort of almost expect to, but organic modeling or like sculpture to model people, hard surface modeling is modeling like shapes or like mechanical things. There's people that model for animation, people that model for game assets, etc. Like, you should sort of expect to like find a thing that you like and like spend some time there before sort of doing everything all at once. I feel like, you know, there's different sort of sections of the brain that go into that. But yeah, real quick, what I was going to show here, if we bend this guy around the z-axis, which is the up and down here, we get this fun little thing where we can turn this into a circle. And that doesn't make a lot of sense with 4, but if we start to add to our array, this is me sort of trying to demonstrate that like arrays happen in order. So what we can do is basically put an array modifier on, it's going to array it out, it's going to make as many copies of that as we've told it, and then we're going to put on a simple deform modifier that's going to take, the array modifier has already happened when the simple deform modifier wants to do its thing. So that's why as we continue to adjust this, it's going to turn that thing into a circle. There's a new section of our concert hall that is like King Donut's little Kirby's fountain level from Smash Melee, and there's a big square wave ring orbiting it. That's exactly how he did it. So like little things like that go a long way.
So what happens if you flip them, if you reverse the order up?
This one's going to break spectacularly. If you, the question was if you swap the order. So this one's going to be funny because it's going to be trying to take one iteration of that square loop and rotate it around itself and then make many copies of that. So you'll, I will tell you this, if you want to just make abstract art, like just go crazy with weird modifiers. My nephews had my computer one time and we're just sitting there like messing around with weird shapes and modifiers and stuff, and they made some of the coolest like glitch art I've ever seen. I saved several of them, like, wow, like, I don't know. It's a good argument for like experiment with it and like, you know, save often. Actually, I'll say save often is like a big slogan for Blender. It's better than it used to be. It does crash, so, but it does take automatic backups fairly regularly, so it'll save you.
For all of us?
I could, yeah. We're gonna go ahead and make all kinds of little giveaways here and 3D print them down at the makerspace. How about that? But yeah, no. Yeah, well, let me show something. One of the things I was going to hope to show is a little bit of animation. We have a King Donut model here. This is really simple King Donut. I was going to try and model this live, but we're almost out of time, and I know we are not going to have the room forever. Rigging is the process of basically making like a skeleton. What they say to think of is like a claymation model has a wire skeleton inside of it, and you know the clay is not the thing that's bending to keep a pose, it's the wire underneath. So you sort of bend it into a pose, and then it will hopefully stay there long enough to take your picture and then pose it again. A rig is basically using an armature, which are these, there's lots of ways to visualize these, but this is the default in Blender, is these sort of octahedron things. You would set out a skeleton of these bones that correlate to the different spots on your model that you want to move. So I've done that here just to sort of demonstrate one. King Donut is a really weird example because it's not a very conventional like body shape, but a rig that I've used for this is basically one big old bone that represents the whole body, two bones that represent the, if they can be called arms, one bone each for the feet, and then one bone for his little square wave crown thing. If we were to actually apply that skeleton to it, what we get is a rigged version of this now. So these bones are applied. There is a little bit to it, and that could be its own whole like panel. But we can go into what's called pose mode, and now as we move these bones, we can get a little flappy action here. This is why I say this is a weird model to show animation on. Let's animate a foot. That animates like you'd expect. So we're going to go into an animation panel here in Blender, a workspace they're called, where we can take this foot and we're going to keyframe some different poses for this. So we're going to put the foot up, and we're going to put it a little bit forward, and we're going to keyframe that, which means to store that. Of course it's going to break. Okay. We're going to store that, and then we're going to go to the halfway point of our animation, and we're going to put it back, and we're going to keyframe that. There's a little bit more to it than that, but if we take that first keyframe and then pull that to our final keyframe, you get this sort of like back and forth. Let's look at that from another angle. So that's, you know, that's something. Now what we can do is take that pose, and let's go to the other foot, and we're going to paste that at the opposite side, but we're going to paste it inverted. So now we've pulled that one forward. It's the same animation, but flipped along that axis. And we're going to take this back pose, and we're going to go to the first frame here. We're going to paste that inverted, and then we're going to go to the last frame, and we're going to paste that inverted again and commit that. We're going to go to our number of keyframes here, and we've got, if this projector doesn't want to die, it's whenever anything moves. It's so weird. Well, that would be animating, I promise. Tell you what, it's real tiny, but here he goes. Look at him go. Woo! I'm happy to spend any time at the portal with folks afterwards. This has been hard to do in this format, but yeah, that's the process of animating. That animation is one of those things that people are terrified of. There is a lot to it. It's a very deep dive to get really good at it, but like taking the magic out of it and just saying you can learn this in a weekend, and there's very simple processes to it. That's one of my goals for all things Blender, is just sort of take the magic out of it. We have 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to show a couple of the more interesting things, and they're not going to animate, so it's not going to work. But we're going to go into what is called the texture painting mode. If you had King Donut and you wanted to animate him, you could also then paint a texture on him, and let's pretend he didn't have sprinkles, but we wanted to give him his sprinkles. This is the unwrapped version of this model, so you can think of it as, you know, I have the thing, and if I try to flip, it's going to break. So let's go into our Blender panel thing, and I'm just going to pull it up here. Ready? This is my favorite picture for demonstrating what UV mapping is. This is, anybody that's had like a little chocolate kitty with like a weird wrapper around it, this is what UV mapping is. You have a shape you need it to be, so you take the shape when it is unwrapped and make it in such a way that when it wraps around, it will be the right thing. That is exactly what this is here for King Donut. It is all of these pieces split in a way that it can lay flat, because you're ultimately painting on a 2D image. Blender gives you a painting mode, where we could come over here and paint some sprinkles on our favorite king. So let's just make some little very, very squiggly, quick little sprinkle lines. Importantly, we can also paint directly on the model. So either of these are fine. Some places are going to work better than others. If you wanted to, change the eyes to be, let's make the eyes orange, I don't know. We're going to come over here and do that, and then what we'll see is that if we spill over, that's not orange, whatever. If we spill over, it's going to start to paint on here, and you can see it showing up here. We didn't want that spill over, so we can come in here and fix that on the UV side, because we can sort of draw more cleanly there. The back and forth of painting directly on a model versus painting directly on the map is a big part of this kind of stuff, and Blender will happily do both. The left side of the screen is why I say you might want a graphics editor, because you can imagine how much easier it might be to make graphics in like an Illustrator or a Photoshop over here, but Blender will export this UV map for you. So what you get is the transparent image of where all of those lines are, and you can pull that into, this is what I'll do all the time, you pull that into Photoshop, set it as one layer, lock that layer, and you're basically drawing underneath it, and you know right where to draw, and you know how it's going to go on the model. What you're seeing in the background here is the default Blender color grid, and it gives you that on purpose because when you make that, and let me set my texture to that, it looks weird, but what you see are all these nice numbered things here, so you know, like, well, this is kind of upside down. So if I went into my edit mode here, I can select just that part of well, here, I guess I should do that another way. You could basically come over here to the UV map, select that part of it. Oh, actually, that's this part of it. And then rotate that. No, it was that part of it. And rotate that so that it's like correctly up and down. So as I would rotate that. Now I'm drawing up and down, and I could do that without wondering why things are upside down when I'm trying to sprinkle his face, which is not a phrase I ever thought I would say. Yeah, King Donut, weird example, terrible to animate, but hopefully as delightful of a mascot to everybody else. I think I'm out of time. Yeah, okay. So yeah, we need to get out of the room. I'm gonna wrap it up there. This is sort of like trying to show a little bit of everything in Blender. If anybody wants to, I'm gonna walk down to the portal. I would love to show people this stuff, answer questions there. I can keep my laptop open and try to demonstrate how any of this stuff works. Thank you all very much for being here. And also thank you for dealing with the many weird technical problems. Happy MAGFest.